The throne, the river, and the tree. Heaven has gotten a lot of really good press. Most everybody wants to go. The problem is, in the same way that people create a picture in their head of what God should look like, they've got the same thing they've done. They've created a picture of what heaven should look like. Some people see it as a nice a resort where you go and only good things happen, but good isn't really clearly defined. What does good mean? And you see, the problem is it's really tailored to their likes and desires. I thought about saying proclivities, but proclivities has this word that it's not a really good thing. And that's not what people would say out loud. It might be what they'd think in their head, but they wouldn't say that, well, heaven's going to be this way. Others say they want to go to hell, because heaven is just where you go and you sit on a cloud and you dress like an angel and you play a harp. And that's really, really boring. But both of these ideas are false, because he who creates the place, heaven, gets to make the rules about all who, what, when, where, and how that all happens. And the same is true with hell. He makes all the rules. All those same rules are made by God, because he created it too. Now, there was a woman and an apologist. That's a guy that talks about why the Bible is true and why God is real. And he had a talk, and she came up to the mic at the question and answer afterwards and said, "Is God going to send me to hell?" And it was a loaded question, because what she really wanted the guy to say is, yes, God's going to send you to hell. And she would say, I could never worship a God who would send a good person like me to hell and allow bad people in. But the guy didn't say that. He said, God is too much of a gentleman to force you to go to some place you don't want to go. And so if you choose not to go to heaven, then there's one alternative. And you've chosen hell. And the question is, why would anyone choose not to go to heaven? It's wonderful. It's a wonderful place. Well, the answer is God is there. If you remember the story of Lazarus and the rich man, here's the story of Lazarus and the rich man from Luke 16:24. You remember Luke 16:24, I'll get it in a second here, Luke 16:24. In Hades, he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far away and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus so that he may dip the tip of his finger into water and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. There's something that you need to notice there. He's saying, send somebody with something good to me where I am. He could have said, Abraham, I see you there afar off. I've been here quite a while. Isn't it time you got me back? I want to go to heaven. But that's not what he asked. It was almost as if he was saying, I'm going to ask for a small thing, and if I get my way, I'll keep asking for more things, and I'll make heaven look more like, I'll make hell more to my liking. I don't want to go to heaven because God is there. Well, if I was given the task of selling heaven to you, I was going to talk it up and convince you, or this woman, to go to heaven, because when she came to the talk, she hadn't thought much about heaven at all. She didn't seem to be much interested in it. And so I'm going to convince her about heaven. Well, here's what it says in Matthew 6. Matthew 6:9. And pray in this way, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. In heaven, Jesus is worshipped. God is worshipped in heaven. So that's what heaven is going to be like. And some people would say, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That means everything in heaven is about us worshiping God, and his will is done. Always. And that has a lot of implications for somebody who desires their own way above all else. So here's a list I came up with to convince people that they want to go to heaven. His rules, his place, his rules. He will be worshipped for all eternity by everyone in heaven. There will be no selfish desires allowed. I was talking to a woman, and she said she met this guy, and he really was taken with her, but he was a really selfish person. And she said, he got a big ring, and he asked her to marry her. And she refused because she recognized that he was selfish. And he would be selfish in the marriage. And he didn't want to be part of that at all. She said, I refused him. Well, in heaven, selfishness won't be allowed. Love will be the rule. And you have to be happy with whoever God chooses to put in heaven. A guy at work, a friend, I was talking about heaven and how Jesus brings those who accept him as their Savior. And he was angry. He was unhappy that bad people got into heaven. How's that so? Good people don't, but bad people do? You see, and you will have to trust him to choose whoever he wants to, and trust him that whatever he chooses for you is perfect and right for you, no exceptions. So, I'm not sure I would have convinced that woman to come to heaven. Now, I was thinking about this. On earth, we're surrounded by death all the time. We see it all the time. A squirrel on the road, crushed. And this is in spite of the profusion of life. New trees, new flowers. But it's all so temporary and fragile. And it's just holding on by a thread. There's what's called the second law of thermodynamics. Everything in the universe is moving toward absolute zero. No heat, no energy left. But none of that has any sway in heaven. The maker of the laws will simply override those rules. So let's look at those verses that we talked about. We read, verse 1, number 1 is the river of the water of life. 22 verse 1. Then he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of God and from the Lamb, in the middle of the street. Now, this is water of life, and it's not in a glass. He didn't say, here's a glass of water. He didn't say, here's a jug of water or a barrel. It's a river. Now, we had flooding here a couple months ago on the St. John River. And my fellow worker who works and lives beside the Mactaquac Dam said he drove by the Mactaquac Dam and it was the lowest he'd ever seen it. And that was the reason for the flooding. They should have kept the dam closed and filled the head pond up with water. And that would have stopped the flooding. And that made sense. But I listened to somebody who runs the Mactaquac Dam, and he said, when we built this 50 years ago, we decided we had to figure out the way the river worked. And if it's in flood stage, we have to let all the water out Because people think the head pond is huge, but it is, but it'll fill up in a couple, 3-4 hours. It'll be full. And as strange as it sounds, water runs downhill. And if you fill up the head pond, you may get to the point where it just keeps backing up. And when you open the dam, finally, you may not get enough water to go out to save the dam, and you may lose it. Well, the point I told this story is, suppose you went to the guys at Mactaquac and it's at flood stage, and you said, I have a glass and I want a drink of water. Is it okay if I get a drink of water? Or do I have to wait tomorrow till where there's more water? No! It's a river. There's always going to be enough water. It's not a problem. In John 4:15, he talks about water. John 4:15 right here says, the woman comes to the well. There's a woman said to him, Sir, he was talking about but whoever drinks the water that I will give him will never thirst. But the water I give him will become in him a well of water, springing up unto eternal life. And the woman said, Give me this water, so I will not be thirsty, nor come all the time here to draw. If you're thirsty and it's water you want, well, there's lots. It's eternal, springing up within you. And in verse 7, 37 and 38, he says, And on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scriptures say, from him, innermost being, will flow rivers of living water. And in verse 17 of the chapter 22 we're in, it says, And the Spirit and the bride says, Come, and let the one who hears says, Come, and let the one who is thirsty come, and let the one who wishes take of the water of life without cost. Jesus is saying, look, there's no shortage here. It's not like there's a cup of water, we have to share it, everybody only gets a little bit. It's unlimited. The water of life is unlimited. It's a river. Number 2 is the tree of life. 22 verse 2 says, In the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nation. Think of this. On either side of the river was the tree of life. Now we talked about this is a river. For water, a river is not a brook. It's not a tiny thing. And you can imagine this is going to be one really big tree to be on both sides of the river. And it sounds like this was a massive harvest of fruit every month, a supply that would not be exhausted at all before a new, different, entirely wonderful type of fruit is ripened for the next month. Now, on a fruit tree that has different fruit every month, you would wonder, as I read this, it sounds to me like John got to see this. He got to see all of it, and I don't know that that's the case, maybe, but it doesn't say the angel told me that this is what happens. It's almost as if he got to see it. Because in heaven, time doesn't matter. Maybe he got to see the different fruit. And something else is that on a fruit tree, it's usually the fruit we think about. But here it says the leaves are important too. And everything on this tree was of value and important for both. So it was good for food and for medicine. You see, the scope of God's provision must be beyond our comprehension. If just one tree can provide so much. The Psalms and the Proverbs talk about how God's arm is not too short. So a river can produce enough water for everyone to drink as much as they want. And a tree can produce as much, one tree can produce enough fruit that everyone can have. It says in verse 14, blessed are those who wash the robes so that they may have the right to the tree of life, that they may enter by the gates of the city. This is for the people to come and eat this fruit from this tree. Number 3 is the throne of God and the Lamb. Verse 3 and 4. And there will no longer be any curse, and the throne of God and the Lamb will be in that. And his bondservants will serve him. And they will see his face, and his name will be on their forehead. There will be no longer any curse. Nothing that is harmed by sin. Nothing that isn't completely perfect. You could choose anything. A leaf from the tree, one of the fruits. Everything you choose, and you look at it, and you examine it closely, and everything's perfect. No flaw whatsoever. You see, because God has redeemed the world with his sacrifice, and he's made it all new. And his bondservants will serve him. This is amazing. This brings you to the woman I was talking about earlier. And you wonder if she'd want to be in eternity, for all eternity, to serve a God that she hadn't even considered. The nice thing about labor that's not touched by sin is that we live in a world where we have to choose good enough. Well, it's close enough. Incandescent bulbs. Think of incandescent bulbs. The problem with an incandescent bulb is that it gives off wonderful yellow light, but 90% of the electricity goes to provide heat. It produces a lot of heat. You can't touch the light bulb without burning your fingers. And these curly light bulbs right here, they're wonderful, except that it takes a couple minutes to warm up. And if it's in the cold, they don't warm up for minutes and minutes. It might be, you might walk into the garage, turn on the light, and you're in there for 5 minutes and the light still hasn't come on enough to see. And when it's cold, they don't last any time. And so somebody's came up with an LED light, and it's wonderful. It's perfect, right? Well, no, it isn't. You see, LED doesn't waste energy. It comes on instantly, but it gives off a blue-white light. And the problem with a blue-white light is it affects your sleep because of the blue in it, and it also harms your eyes. So we're working with something that's, well, we have to juggle this. We have to pick our poison, so to speak. It's just close enough. It will have to do. It's a give and take, an acceptance of something that's less than perfect. You see, the people that get to serve God will do so because it brings them their greatest joy. And it will never fade or diminish over time because the effect of sin is gone. We'll be happy to be known as his servants. It will be our highest honor. Well, number 4 is the light of the world. Verse 5. There will no longer be any night, and there will not have need for the light of a lamp nor the light of the sun, because the Lord will illuminate them, and they will reign forever and ever. This will be a perfect light. Remember I talked about the light that these fluorescent lights aren't perfect, or incandescent, or LED. None of them are perfect. But this light will be perfect and strong, and a light without shadows. And you will be able to see things clearly, so that you will say, wow, This is so wonderful. And I see every detail. There's a story of a man who on Thanksgiving, he got his children the day before to go and count everything. Well, we have 8 cows, we have 36 chickens, we have 49 pigs, or whatever, and this many bales of hay. And he had a really good summer, and he said, let's spend the money and run the poles and get electric lights. And so they did. And the next year came planting time, and they planted, and then there was a heavy, heavy frost, and it killed all their seeds. And they planted again, and it rained and rained and rained until everything rotted in the ground. And they didn't have anything to plant for the third time, and no one else did. And they had to sell some of the cattle to buy seed, and they planted it, but it still didn't grow very good. And they had to have something, and they sold. So when Thanksgiving came around, nothing to count. What are we going to count? And his children thought, we didn't count anything because there's nothing left to count. And so he turned on the electric lights around the table in the evening, and he went up in the attic and he got the oil lights, the oil lamps that he didn't need anymore, and he turned them on and he lit them, and then he turned off the electric lights. And the people, the family said, wow, is it ever dark here? Well, the point of this story for us is that it won't be that way in heaven. The light will be such that we would, with our eyes now, we wouldn't be able to stand it, but we will be able to see perfectly. And it says there will be no more night, which means that there will be no more need for sleep. And if you're like me, there's some days you just hope that it's pretty soon be bedtime so you can go lay down and go to sleep and rest because you're so tired. But fatigue in heaven will no longer be a concern. You won't have to deal with this. I know at work sometimes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon my head goes down and I'm hardly not go to sleep, but we won't need sleep. And we'll have fun worshiping God all the time and visiting and working with other people and discovering all the secrets of the universe and God's creation, and it'll never end. You'll never run out of things to keep learning and sharing and with other people. And sharing what you've learned with them and listening to what they've learned. No end to the pleasures of the Lord. Number 5 is, and they're no longer, number 6 and 7, number 5 is the one who heeds. Verse 6, and he said to them, these words are faithful and true, and the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show to his bondservant the things that must soon take place. Behold, I'm coming quickly. Blessed is he who heeds the words of the prophecy of this book. He says these words are faithful and true. We can trust them. It'll be exactly as the words say it will be. And God sent his servant, the angel, to John to make sure that he got it right. You see, if John didn't have a guide, maybe he'd stand in the wrong place. Now, this is kind of funny how you get, if you're looking in the wrong place, everything looks different. There was a video of Donald Trump during the campaign in 2016, and it's Hillary Clinton, and the news networks made a lot of him towering over her and being as if he's trying to threaten her and so the problem was it was wrong, because when you saw the rest of the video, both of them had a place to stand. Her place was here and his was here. And it was her time to talk in the debate, and she walked over and stood in front of him, and because of the angle of the camera, and the fact that he's taller, he looked like he didn't move. You see, sometimes it's really good to be in the right place at the right time and see what you need to see. This is what happened to John. The angel who guided John made sure he received all the right information, made sure he stood in the right place so he got to see the tree and the water and all the other things that happen in Revelations. And then he says, I'm coming quickly. Blessed is he who heeds the words. We tend to have a lot of people, maybe you're one of them, who says, are we there yet? Type of people. And the longer he tarries, we're thinking, well, why hasn't Jesus come? The longer he tarries, the more people come to know Jesus and will partake in all these wonderful blessings that John got to see. In closing, I want to look at two kings of Israel and how they saw God. They both had the same chance to obey God, to worship him. But one refused to take it to heart. In 1 Samuel 15, it talks about Saul. 1 Samuel 15, Saul he's been given a job. He's to go to kill all the Amalekites and destroy everything utterly. This is his job. And he says and he fails, by the way. In 15, verse 14 says, Samuel says, what is this, the bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of cattle that I hear? Saul said, we have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. But the rest we utterly destroyed. You notice that he said, the Lord your God. He's not saying the Lord our God. He's not saying the Lord my God. He says the Lord your God. Samuel, this is your God. We'll do the best we can for your God. In verse 20, it says, 21, it says, but the people took some of the spoils, sheep and oxen, the choicest of things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgal. Again, he says, the Lord your God. And in verse 31, he says, verse 30 said, then when he said, I have sinned, but please honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and go back with me, that I may worship the Lord your God. He had all the opportunities to make him to say, the Lord my God. But Saul didn't worship God in that way. He understood that this isn't my God. I'll do what I'm told, but maybe. This is what Hezekiah said. Verse 37, verse 20. Now, O Lord, our God, deliver us from the hand of all the kingdoms, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are God. He said, the Lord, our God. He recognized, and he wanted to say, this is my God. You see, heaven is for people who acknowledge that God is theirs. He isn't just the God of other people. He is their God. And they want to spend whatever part of their life acknowledging him as their God. Do you remember the thief on the cross? Jesus is on the cross. And he only spent a short time acknowledging the Lord as God. But he chose the Lord as God. That woman that I talked about, she didn't acknowledge the Lord as her God. My friend bristles at work. I told you about him being mad at God allowing people that aren't good to get into heaven and good people aren't. But I said, it's not good people that go to heaven. It's people that acknowledge that the Lord is their God. It's the ones that accept Jesus as their Savior. In eternity, you will be where your king is. And if you're your own king, you don't want to be someplace where you have another king. If you want to go to heaven, you must choose Jesus as your king. And your service to him starts here, and it continues for all eternity. And I can't even begin to imagine how wonderful that will all be. So if I haven't explained this well enough, and I haven't given you all the information, it's because I can't. I'm just not that good at this. But it'll be wonderful. But the first thing you have to do is acknowledge Jesus as your king, here and now. Not because you won't want to be in heaven if you don't do it now. Let's pray.